This is episode 2 of the Africa Hired podcast. My name is Kola and I'm here with my co host, Ayo. How's it going today, Ayo?
I'm doing well, Kola. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. One thing I noticed is that, obviously Yoruba is a very tonal language. You and I of Yoruba descent. And
Hmm.
when I speak English, my Yoruba is a little off, right? Earlier I said Ayo, like your name is Ayo, not Ayo. But I was
Yeah,
going in that flow of the English language.
yeah,
Uh, and that kind of talks about maybe a little bit of some of the differences in the global um, workspace or the global labor market, right? Because you're going to have cultural differences, you're going to have language differences, and those are
hmm,
things that our audience are going to have to overcome. But that's not what necessarily what we're going to speak about today. It was just something that happened um, while I was doing the introduction, so I thought I would bring that up. Um, but a couple of things to start with. Number one is that we did our first episode last week actually, and we got some feedback for some of the friends that we have, and one of them was about the fact that we let our Nigerian ego get to view, right? We assumed that Africa as a whole shares the problems that Nigeria has, specifically when it comes to infrastructure availability, in this
yeah,
case, power and internet.
yeah,
And a lot of African countries actually have 24/7 power, so they don't have that problem. I am so jealous, right? I had the opportunity to travel to Ghana, to travel to Benin
yes,
Republic and
yeah.
Togo.
Ghana,
They
especially. Yeah,
all had like 24/7 power, and Nigeria, we are still working on it.
yeah. We're going a bit backwards, but we'll see where things go in the future.
Yeah. So to our African brothers and sisters, we apologize. We are Nigerians. Forgive us. You already know that how we are with our ego. Forgive us on that. But I think the principles that we're going to discuss on the podcast kind of translates across any African country, right? At the end of the day, what we're trying to do is to boost employment opportunities for all Africans, not just Nigerians. So that's
Yeah,
something to
yeah,
keep in mind.
yeah,
So with
definitely.
that said, I'm going to turn it over to you, Ayo. Maybe you could introduce our topic today.
So our first topic today is gonna be kind of talking about a little bit about the current economic climate and how that might impact those in on the African continent trying to enter the labor market, switch roles in the labor market, make career adjustments, things like that. So that's going to be our first topic today.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more, kind of dive in a little bit more about some of the things that are happening in the economic space here in the US.
So I mean, currently we know about the tariff regime that's currently occurring in the U.S. and it's affecting economies globally.
Mhm.
Actually, as they say, if the U.S. catches a cold, the rest of the world gets the flu or whatever. I don't know what worse disease they get, but so in this case, we know that that's going to slow economic growth in a lot of developing countries, most of which are on the African continent. So it's going to affect those in diaspora or those on the continent who are trying to um, aim for certain job roles or certain markets or certain companies and things like that. So we're going to look for ways to kind of market yourself in a more combative or competitive job market. Especially now, there's going to be lesser job availability and things like that. So um, those are things that you're going to want to look for when you're trying to market yourself for a role, whether it's a contract role, a remote role, or on the continent of Africa, basically.
One of the ways that you and I met was through a mutual friend of ours, right?
Yes.
But we did a podcast on my other podcast, The Better Informed Immigrant, and I got to talk to you about your experience doing remote work. And one of the things you told me then was, hey, you know what? When you're doing remote work, your work speaks for you, right? Because you're not
Exactly.
physically present, your work speaks for you. And the reason
Yeah.
why I bring that up is because when you have a situation where the labor market is shrinking, maybe companies are either laying people off or they are not hiring people as much. The first people to go or the first people to target are going to be people that are working remotely,
Yes. Yes.
right?
That's
Because
usually,
it's
yeah.
easier to let them go.
Yeah. Those are usually the low hanging fruit. Companies won't really say it, but oftentimes, sometimes what keeps you in a job is just having face value. Like someone has met you personally, they have a personal connection with you. They might decide to keep you versus someone who never comes into the office or someone who they haven't really seen and things like that. So the first people to go are usually contract or remote workers, because those are seen as people who essentially if they're let go, no one's really gonna miss them. Like there's no personal connection at the
Mm,
job, right? So that's why it's very, very important to be very, 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 very critical role of the organization or critical on whatever projects you're working on. So as Carla mentioned, your work 100% speaks for you in that regard. Where it's like they might not have a personal connection with you, but they know, oh, this person submitted this project or this person helped us finish this deliverable. You're much more likely to stay um, on the job or on the project or on the contract.
mhm. So we have this interesting opportunity and challenge, right? I think somebody, I don't know if this is true, but somebody once told me that when you look at the Chinese character for crisis, I believe it translates to dangerous opportunity, uh, right? I don't know if that's true or not. I never checked it. But my
Yeah,
point I'm trying to
it
make
sounds
here
good.
is the point I'm trying to make here is that you have companies basically shutting down their hiring or laying people off,
Mhm.
right? That would obviously affect remote work. But at the same time, you have Africans entering into the remote workspace at a lower price point
Exactly.
compared to people that are across the globe. So it is possible that some companies would say, hey, whether it is on a short term basis, whether it's on a long term basis, why don't we start hiring people from Africa to fill in those roles? Because there is a cost benefit to do so. It still allows us to get enough people or get enough talent in to get the job done without necessarily taking on the additional labor expense that we would have otherwise. So
Yes.
going back to what you were talking about, right? We're talking about standards and your work speaking for you. I think the way I want to translate it is probably calling it the standard, right? And I'm going to use Nigeria as an example. We know that when we talk about standard in Nigeria, it means something, and that thing, that level of standard, is different from the level of standard that you would expect when you're in the West,
Mhm.
right? So when people are competing for global jobs, they need to understand you cannot use the Nigerian standard, right? You need to use the Western standard if that's where you're
Yeah.
applying, or the standard of that local area where that you're looking at, right? So you need to make sure that you're aware of that standard, number one. And then number two is you need to figure out how to bring yourself and your skill set and your work product up to that standard, because that is one way that you would be able to compete in the global labor community.
Yes. I think this is where it's important to have very, very strong practical skills. I think it's good if you have general education or knowledge of the theory of whatever field they're trying to work in. But at the end of the day, these practical skills are what's going to differentiate you from other workers. Right. So though it's very, very important to, I think, to have strong practical skills and experience in whatever field you're trying to enter. And in this case, it could be personal projects, it could be side projects, it could be gig projects, but having a documented resume or portfolio of projects that you've done with that specific skill set is going to be something that's going to one differentiate you, but two also allow you to maintain whatever role you have in the organization.
Mhm. So one of the ways that people can do that, I think, is taking a look at what's online. The internet is a wonderful space, right?
Yes.
Yes, there is a lot of stuff that is not so positive, but there's also a lot of stuff that is positive, right?
Mhm.
And the reason why I bring that up is look in the space for any particular industry you are in, look at who are the leaders or internet leaders in that space. What are they producing? What are they looking at? What is the level of quality that they're producing? Because I think that's really important to kind of use that as a gauge to understand what is the global standard for this and what should I aspire to. The other thing you talked about that I think is really critical is a portfolio,
Mhm.
right? You need to have a portfolio. So that means creating your own portfolio is going to be based on pet projects of yours to start with. But as you then begin to work for clients or companies, you can build that to include corporate projects and things like that. But the portfolio is helpful for helping you get your foot in the door, right? If you are
Mhm.
competing against somebody else and they don't have a portfolio, even if they have experience, there is no way for the hiring manager to know that this person indeed has that experience or if he's just a good interviewer. Right? So,
Yes.
you having that portfolio, you can use that as a differentiator to say, hey, I have this experience and I can prove it by doing this.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
Tell me a little bit more about, have you used portfolios in your personal joining in the workforce?
Yes, it's usually a combination of portfolios and references.
Okay.
Yeah, so usually like in my specific field, I'll get asked what kind of projects I've been on.
Hmm.
And then from that, they'll kind of gauge what kind of work I've done. And then also they'll specifically ask like, well, what applications am I used to using? Um, and even specifically, sometimes they'll even ask who you work with.
Mm.
At that point, it's literally trying to gauge what kind of influence or impact you had on a specific project or role. So they usually definitely ask what applications I've worked with and what specific projects I've built using those applications and things like that. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. So kind of talk a little bit. I know you said in your space, but really what you do is in the automation world, right? So
yes,
that's
yeah,
automation, PLC programming,
hmm,
industrial control, things like that. So
yes,
if you're African, if you're in those areas and that's those fields, and you're interested in learning more about that, reach out to us at AfricaHired@gmail.com. I can give you Ayo's contact, and you can reach out to him and hopefully collaborate on projects in the future, or maybe we'll just trade ideas and help you understand a little bit more about the global standard or at least the American standard when it comes to automation and industrial control. That's kind of really important.
yeah,
Um, but I think one key thing to kind of mention here is that you are here in the US and you are using portfolios, right?
hmm,
You are using portfolios, you're using references, and people are asking about those things.
yes.
Even more so, uh, would that be when they're interviewing somebody from the African continent? Maybe somebody who doesn't have experience. Typically, uh, I'm not sure how much weight a reference in Africa will be to an American hiring manager or an American human resources. So
Yeah.
when you are doing this, it might be helpful to not just have local references on the continent, but also global references that can speak on your behalf and advocate for you when those people are reaching out.
Yes. I mean, we do have some multinational corporations in Africa that, if you've worked for them, like they have enough global notoriety that if someone sees that on your portfolio or your resume, they'll take it at face value. But like Carla mentioned, if you can are able to get sort of an international reference, I think that would go well to kind of boost your standing. But I mean, at the end of the day, you still have to, the experience still has to be there, right? You have to have the practical skills and the experience. And then sort of the names or the things, other things that stand out are kind of number two. Those are what people are going to look at after that. But I think right now, if you don't have sort of the international back end or the references, focus on the practical skills first,
Hmm.
because that can get you eventually get you to the point where you get those references.
Hmm. So you bring up a really good key point that I was thinking about, right? So some people have been in industry for a few years, so they've had time to build those references. They've had
Mhm.
time to work on a few projects, right? But you also have people that are just graduating from college and they're just entering the workforce, right? And they may not necessarily have the opportunity yet to do build some of these things. But what you said was really key. You need to focus on the practical skills, right? And one
Yes.
of the things I think we make a mistake on, especially on the continent, is that we think every single skill has to be learnt in some kind of traditional learning environment. That could be college, that could be some kind of training, that could be something else, right? There's a
Yes.
lot of uh, opportunities and learning opportunities specifically online. YouTube is a
Hmm.
wonderful resource. You can learn a lot there. That is a place where you can acquire technical skills in a non-traditional way, right?
Yes. Yes.
And when I say technical skills, I don't mean tech. I mean technical skills in any domain,
Yes.
right? So you can learn it in that way. You can do some personal projects. There's a lot of open source projects or even just projects that you come up with that you do, and that's kind of how you can build your portfolio from scratch, right?
Yes.
I'm going to use an example that's near and dear to us right now because we have a podcast. But if you're interested in video editing, if you're interested in audio editing, if you're interested in graphics design, or even social media, I'm using those because those are close to some of the services that we need for our podcast right now.
Yeah.
All of the skills that you need to do that you can learn online and by doing, right? You can find a podcast like ours or somebody else's podcast and make your own cut out of it, edit it in different ways, maybe do some interesting things with the audio editing, do some interesting things with the video editing. Everybody has social media nowadays. Use your social media to talk about the topic that's of passion to you. And that
Mhm.
could end up being your portfolio for approaching other people to say, hey, you know what? I've been dabbling in social media for X amount of time. These are the channels that I manage, right? Let me provide that service to you for a fee. And that speaks for you. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the best part about a lot of these sort of skills and technologies is that there's a lot of the population for it is very large. Like there's a lot of people who, as you mentioned, do video editing, um, are kind of in the podcast space, do and even if it's more technical skills, if you want to talk about programming or even something more engineering or even finance, there's a lot of people who operate in those spaces who provide free educational content, usually on YouTube. YouTube, if not YouTube, there's also Udemy that has courses for as like the lowest prices that you can imagine. They're always doing discounts. Um, so there's definitely different platforms where you can gain this information and knowledge and these skills for very low costs. All right, which is compared to traditional means of education, um, I think is sort of the benefit of the new technology and things that we have these days. So definitely, if you're passionate and you um, are willing to kind of gain these skills and learn these things, there are ways to learn them that are very cheap online.
Mhm. So the interesting thing about this is I think I was talking to you a few weeks back or a few months back, and I haven't done anything with it yet, but I was talking to you about PLC programming and saying,
Yeah,
hey, I want to acquire the skill. And what you did was send me was it a Udemy
I think it
course?
was Udemy. Yeah,
It was like 90% sale on this
yeah.
stuff at the time. I didn't do anything with it. I apologize. But um so that's, I mean, even us here in the US, as an example, are using
Mhm.
those vehicles
Yes.
to train ourselves and upskill ourselves for roles. So
Mhm.
they're even more important to be used on the continent, I think, because they're much more economical than taking the traditional class or going to the traditional school sometimes.
Yeah.
Take a look at your opportunities and your resources and see which ones fit you better. It does require some hard work, right?
Yes.
When you're in
Yes.
college, you have class at a specific time. You
Mhm.
have a professor there who's grading the stuff. This one, there's nobody chasing you. And if you're like me, you probably didn't do it because life took over and you found some other excuse.
Mhm.
But if your goal is to enter a particular industry, that is a good way to upskill and get some actual practical knowledge about it, get some projects to do. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to kind of shout out really quickly is for graphics design specifically,
Mhm.
there's this guy on YouTube. I don't know his name. I've never met him, but he has this Canva masterclass. It's like a 2 hour
Mhm.
video, and it talks about almost everything that has to do with Canva, teaching
Mhm.
you different things. So for those of you that are in graphics design or want to go into that field or want to go into social media management, you may want to go check out that stuff. He actually has a program already for getting the certificate, and I think it's
Mhm.
free. I've not looked into it, but I think it's free. You watch the video, and then it has projects that you do, and when you complete it, will send you a certificate. So that's also another way to kind of get some skill there. Like you said, a lot of
Yeah.
industry leaders are putting their content online for free, and people
Mhm.
can actually upskill through that way.
Yeah. And I want to stress the importance of self-learning. I think for me personally, I believe that most of the skills I've gained um, have been outside of school, actually.
Mm,
I think for me, like a lot of the knowledge was in school, but the skills have been outside of school. And also, there's been knowledge outside of school as well. So I stress that to say that over the course of kind of like whatever career or whatever um, kind of job role you're looking for, you're gonna have to keep learning. From and if we stick to video editing, for example, or graphics design, for example, there's always new platforms and new applications that come out. All right, and the kind of the employees or clients who are looking for video editing, graphics design are gonna aim for people who are using the latest platforms and the latest applications. So it doesn't matter how well skilled you are in the previous application, people always want newer and better, right? Because there's always improvements that happen over time. So the importance of self-learning, learning new applications, learning new platforms, is also going to give you long-lasting longevity in whatever kind of um, sphere or skill set that you're trying to work in.
mhm,
So we also know if it's even if it's programming, there's always new advances in programming language. Someone somewhere has built some library that makes something easier to do. Well, PLC programming is the same thing. Um, so there's always new technologies that come out, and the sooner or the quicker you learn that technology, the easier it is. It's going to be for you to kind of stay in that field or sustain your importance in that field.
mm. So that's a really key point that you brought up. I don't necessarily have anything else to add to that. That was really well said, I think. So, couple of things, right? If you like what we do, if you think it's positive and you would like to provide some feedback to us, reach out to us at africahired@gmail.com. Also, you can just reply to any of our social media channels, Africa Hired, and put a comment there, and we will take a look at that and respond. We both have jobs, regular jobs that pays the bills, so we are not the fastest at responding, but we will
Yeah.
respond. That's said. The other thing I would talk about is that, you know what, if you are on the continent, because we are plugged into the podcast community now by doing this, we are getting introduced to more and more people that are in that space that are doing other podcasts and things. And one of the needs that they have is going to be things like social media management, audio editing, video editing, graphics design. So if you have skills in those areas and you would like to do some work in those areas, reach out to us at africahired@gmail.com and let us see whether or not we could put you in touch with some of these people, so that you can actually help them with some of the services that they need. Now, with that said, I have to remind you, remember the standard, remember the quality, right? So if you're in those fields, make sure you're going online, YouTube or other resources, find out what the global standard is, because that's
Mhm.
what these people would be expecting, not
Yes.
necessarily the local standard and the whatever country that you're in.
Yes. And I know definitely I'm definitely looking for graphics designers and video editing as well. So please reach out to us at Africa Hired, and we'll see what we can do.
All right, awesome. Ayo, it's always a pleasure. I love doing this with you. And I hope you have an excellent weekend. We're doing it recording on the weekend today, so
Yes.
that's fun. Where
You
are you,
know,
Ayo, actually? You usually travel for work. Where are you at the moment?
today I'm in Arlington, Virginia, so I'm back home. So
Okay.
yeah, so luckily I got to stay home for this episode.
All right. Awesome. Awesome. All right, Ayo, good to talk to you again, and I will talk to you next week.
All right,
Bye,
sounds good.
folks.
Bye.